woman dies of anaphylactic shock after her life-saving injection pen suddenly disappears. Just one day later, police discover the body of another woman shot dead in a locked apartment, and horrifyingly, this victim is the same woman who mysteriously disappeared 38 years ago. As seemingly disparate clues begin to piece together, Lauren and Dodds realize they are facing a conspiracy that has been hidden for decades. But the most terrifying thing is that the killer always seems to be one step ahead of the police, leading them to an unexpected truth. Lauren is a strong, decisive, and efficient police officer. Dodds, while often seen as old-fashioned by outsiders, is always keen at spotting suspicious details. This time, the case doesn't seem too complicated at first glance. The previous Saturday, a middle-aged woman named Susie suffered anaphylactic shock while applying lipstick, but the adrenaline injection pen she kept in her bag had disappeared, leading to her death. There were 4 people at the party that day: Susie and her husband Brad, Lola, Susie's daughter, and Cal, Lola's husband. They all knew Susie was allergic to nuts. The lipstick she used had been adulterated with nut oil. This meant the killer was almost certainly one of them. The crime occurred around 4 p.m. on Saturday. Their gardener, Nevis, had seen a woman in a white dress lurking in Susie's bedroom. Lola was also wearing a white dress that day, but the police arrested the wrong person. The case was temporarily closed. Before leaving, Dodds helped the family correct their house number plate. But just one day later, the police received a report of another murder. A female body was found in an apartment with no signs of forced entry or rape. The killer was almost certainly someone known to the victim. The victim had been shot once in the head at close range. The wound suggested the gun was held close to the victim's head. There was a sticker on the carpet with the number 3 on it. Police estimated the time of death to be around 6 a.m. on Sunday. Besides clothes and toiletries, there were no identification documents in the apartment. Only information provided by the landlord confirmed her name was Anne. Through medical records and birthmarks, police discovered something even more unbelievable. Her information matched that of a missing person case recorded 38 years earlier. At that time, the police mobilized a large force, but were unable to solve the case. Anne was only 15 years old at the time. The only witness to the event was her younger brother, Mark. Their parents later passed away, leaving Mark as her only surviving relative. He lives with his wife Lucy in a wealthy neighborhood less than 2 kilometers from the scene. They have 2 daughters who recently went to India to participate in charitable activities. For 38 years, Mark had been searching for his sister, but he never expected to receive such a painful truth. Immediately after Lauren and Dodds left, Lucy chased after them. She had always been Mark's devoted wife and knew how deeply Anne had hurt him. Therefore, she pleaded with the police to uncover the truth and save the family. Dodds checked Mark's home security cameras and saw that he had returned home around 7 p.m. on Saturday. He and his wife didn't leave until 11:45 a.m. on Sunday. Anne had been murdered at 6 a.m. that morning. That means Mark didn't leave the house until 6 hours after she was killed. Ballistics data showed the killer used a Makarov military-grade pistol. At this point, the police chief provided further clues. He had previously worked at the Major Crimes Unit for 2 years, and Mark had been a key suspect. He was suspected of involvement in human trafficking, kidnapping, and murder. Perhaps he cleverly concealed his involvement after marrying Lucy, but the nature of this type of person never changes. The type of gun used to kill Anne suggests the killer was a professional assassin, and Mark easily obtained this type of gun. Could Anne's death be related to him? But why would he kill someone who had been missing for 38 years? As Mark and Lucy were preparing to fly to India to visit their child, Lauren and Dodds informed him of the latest developments in the case. Lucy suggested postponing the trip to allow the police investigation, but Mark flatly refused. This wasn't surprising, as he was clearly the decision-maker within the family. The police also had no legitimate reason to prevent them from leaving the country. If this continued, the investigation would quickly reach a dead end. Considering Lucy had previously begged Lauren for help, Lauren pressured her to persuade Mark to stay. Meanwhile, Susie's case was still unresolved. The police needed Nevis's confirmation. While cleaning the truck, Dodds discovered a piece of lace among Nevis's personal belongings. Dodds suddenly remembered that Anne had the exact same type of lace at the crime scene. Indeed, this piece of lace perfectly matched Anne's white lace dress. Underneath the dress, an adrenaline injection pen was hidden. Unexpectedly, the gardener's testimony about the woman in the white dress linked the 2 cases. Could Anne be the real killer of Susie? According to surveillance camera footage, when Nevis arrived at Susie's house on the afternoon of the murder, there was a woman in a white dress in the back of the truck. He then remembered that it was the woman he had met on the road. She asked him to buy her painkillers, but when he returned, the other woman had disappeared. It turned out she had sneaked into his truck, then hid in Susie's house, and quietly completed the murder. Afterwards, she framed Lola. Lola's wardrobe was full of white dresses. The person who knew this detail must have been someone someone who had contact with the family. The police investigated Susie's background and discovered she was a courageous reporter who had exposed countless cases of bribery, corruption, and organized crime. Mark's shady identity coincided with Susie's field of reporting. Could it be that Mark killed Susie to cover up something, or Anne killed Susie to protect Mark? Lola was later declared innocent. She didn't blame the police for arresting the wrong person. She was only eager to find the killer of her mother. After Susie's death, the enormous fortune under her name was divided equally between Lola and Brad. The police also discovered that Lola's husband, Cal, was experiencing financial difficulties. On Saturday morning, he finished his questioning at the police station at 5:30 a.m. He didn't get home until 8 p.m. Where had he been, and what had he been doing during that time? Brad also left the police station at 5:30 p.m. He had a criminal record but claimed to have changed. However, neither Brad nor Cal had a credible alibis. If the motive for the murder was money, neither could be ruled out as a suspect. Finally, under Lucy's persuasion, Mark agreed to cooperate with the police investigation. The police described in detail Anne's disappearance 38 years ago. At that time, Anne had led Mark to the vicinity of the old local church to see the inscribed plaque, but when he turned around, she had vanished. The problem was, if she had brought him there, it meant she had known about the plaque's existence for some time. Therefore, it was possible that this disappearance was a staged act orchestrated by her. There were two paths to take. If she didn't take the road home, she must have taken the path along the riverbank. Several boats were always moored along the river. That year, the police suspected Anne had been kidnapped, so they monitored the train station and airport, but they never considered searching the boats. Could she have left by boat? Sure enough, the police found that a boat had left the dock on the day of the disappearance. It was still moored at a nearby city port. The boat was registered under Gary's name. He had passed away in 2014. Anne had left Mark and disappeared with Gary. Lauren and Dodds went to the boat's mooring to investigate. In fact, Lauren had recently been dealing with relationship problems. She and her boyfriend frequently argued. Sometimes he wouldn't reply to her texts. Other times he wouldn't answer her calls. She even monitored his phone and discovered he had secretly gone to London for a decadent lifestyle. Being busy with work and also dealing with relationship problems made her extremely miserable. While the two were talking, they found the boat. A boy who bore some resemblance to Gary stepped aboard. At first glance, she realized the case had made a new breakthrough. The boy named Luke was Anne's son. Upon seeing Susie's photo, he recognized her as the woman who had visited Anne the previous week. That year, Anne had left her hometown with Gary. They had fallen in love. The three of them barely interacted with outsiders and had no friends. Until Gary's death, only Anne and Luke were left to live together. After Susie visited Anne, she left her son on the boat, saying she had work to do, but then she never returned. Luke had also heard Anne talk about Mark. Every time she mentioned him, she seemed extremely frightened. Meanwhile, Mark was in the basement calling his daughters, using serious words to express his fatherly affection. Lucy opened the window in the house, repeating her duties as a housewife. The police speculated that Susie sought out Anne to investigate the criminal gang behind Mark. But what reason would Anne have to kill Susie? At the same time, the police uncovered the truth about Brad. He had claimed to be just a member of a criminal gang, but in reality, he was a former mercenary. Countless innocent people had died at his hands. He could easily have obtained the military-grade gun used to kill Anne. Further speculation led to Brad being the prime suspect. He could no longer conceal his actions and produced the notes Susie had entrusted to him. These contained mostly investigative documents about Mark and a witness statement Susie had obtained from Anne that could prove Mark's guilt. Just then, Lucy called to report that Mark had disappeared. Apparently, to avoid police pursuit, he had deliberately driven away in Lucy's car. It wasn't until the police told Lucy about Mark's shady dealings that she realized what was happening. She led the police to see the tunnel in the basement. This was another entrance to the house. On Sunday morning, the day Anne was murdered, if Mark had left through this tunnel, he could have avoided all the surveillance cameras. He could have committed the murder without anyone knowing. The case had suddenly progressed too smoothly. If Mark was really the killer, the story would be too tedious. Before Anne disappeared, she had witnessed Mark murdering a rival gang member. To prevent Anne from being blackmailed by Mark, Gary and she staged the disappearance. Now, while Susie wanted to investigate, Anne wanted revenge on Mark. The two women planned to overthrow him, but then both died. This makes it impossible not to think that Mark was the killer. He killed to keep his secret and to hide his past. But was that really the truth? Lauren and Dodds questioned Nevis once again. The most perplexing question was, who was the woman in the white dress who had gotten into his car? His memory was hazy. He only remembered that the woman had brown eyes, but Anne had blue eyes. Clearly, she wasn't the woman in the white dress that Nevis had mentioned. Nevis kept saying that he'd never had a girlfriend in his life. The first time he saw a woman in a white dress, his heart pounded. Lauren deduced the answer from his unconscious gestures. detectors. She knew who the killer was. Lauren immediately led her men to intercept the plane that was about to take off. The real killer was Lucy. Every murderer has their own way of revealing themselves. Lucy had a distinctive habit of tilting her head. This was what Nevis remembered, and was also the fatal flaw that led to her exposure. In reality, the so-called husband working outside, wife taking care of the household, was just a facade. None of Mark's business deals could be carried out without Lucy. Every decision, every scheme was orchestrated by her. At first, it seemed Lucy didn't want to be exposed, but in reality, she deliberately diverted the police's attention to Mark, while she herself escaped unscathed. Mark loved his wife so much that he willingly complied. He even transferred all his assets to her name, but he never expected her to ultimately accuse him. Even so, he didn't want another stain on his reputation. Currently, there is no direct evidence to incriminate Lucy. Nevis's testimony is also unlikely to be accepted by the court. Lucy prepared a favorable indictment, proving that Mark had manipulated her mentally for a long time to shift all the blame onto him. To any police question, she responded with, "I have nothing to say." If things continued like this, Lucy would at most receive a 4-year suspended sentence. The charge would only be complicity in assisting Mark, not murder. This was the best outcome for her, but the most unjust for the victims. Dodds was furious, but he didn't know what to do. When he turned around, he saw the interrogation room number 3, and suddenly an idea struck him. Dodds asked for an extra hour. He borrowed the number 3 sticker from a colleague, and the case at that house led to a turning point. Lucy and Mark confirmed they hadn't left the house on Sunday morning. The police also confirmed that Mark was on the phone in the bedroom at the time. Meanwhile, there was a secret tunnel in the basement leading to the street. The entire electrical system of the house was also located in the basement. Each floor was numbered, except for the 3rd floor, which was missing a number. Perhaps the repair workers had dropped it. The number 3 sticker found at Anne's murder scene perfectly matched the missing number 3. The real killer had accidentally stepped on this mud-covered sticker during the crime and left it at the scene. Glue marks matching the glue on the number 3 sticker were also found under Lucy's shoe. That's the most compelling evidence. Lucy was born into a disadvantaged family. After marrying Mark, she discovered he worked for a criminal gang. Her trust crumbled. Her beautiful life was shattered. But Lucy held on to Mark's love and weaknesses. She thought she could control everything. She wanted to take revenge and send him to prison. Unexpectedly, the one controlling everything lost from the moment her trust was broken. The only emotion she could feel was anger. Now she bursts into tears because she can't feel anything anymore. Why did it turn out like this? Lauren lives in a famous tourist town in England, also officially recognized as the City of Love. Just a week after Susie's case was solved, a total of 21 weddings were held in different locations in the town. But no one anticipated that a series of murders would cast a dark shadow over each soon-to-be married couple. The first couple was receiving blessings from family and friends. When the guests had settled down, waiting for the ceremony to begin, everyone discovered that the pastor presiding over the service had disappeared. The bride's father, clutching a blood-stained dagger, staggered forward before collapsing. The pastor died in his office. Before his last breath, he pointed to his chest and repeatedly uttered the word snake. At the same time, Lauren had a strange dream. It seemed she was celebrating her wedding, but the hands of the officiant seemed to be commanding something. In the moment the guests vanished, the vast hall was left with only Lauren and a menacing man. She awoke from her nightmare. She had recently come to London to find her boyfriend, having just finished her police leave. She hadn't yet adjusted to the pace of work. Therefore, the crime scene investigation was assigned to Dodds. The forensic team determined that the murder weapon was the dagger in the hands of Lenny, the bride's father. There were signs of a violent struggle at the scene, but no signs of forced entry. The pastor had multiple stab wounds to his stomach and neck. He also had defensive wounds on his hands. A discarded bottle of liquor lay nearby. When the police arrived, the small door leading from the pastor's room to the outside was locked. According to the church manager, this door was never opened. Lauren arrived at the scene just in time after the investigation concluded. As she approached the church, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Coincidentally, the wedding in her dream seemed to have taken place in this very church. 2 people were talking to the bride and her 2 sisters. Their mother had died of illness 10 years earlier. Lenny had raised his 3 daughters alone. The pastor was Lenny's close friend. To the 3 girls, he was like an uncle. Their relationship was very close. Therefore, Lenny couldn't have been the pastor's killer. He had fallen and hit his head, resulting in a severe concussion and temporary amnesia. He didn't remember what happened at the wedding. He also forgot how he got the dagger. Besides the guests, there was a female reporter named Dora at the scene, working on a wedding report. 3 hours after the incident, she finally met with the 2 officers to report. She had photographed the entire scene. She handed the film roll and camera memory card to Dodds, and then hurried to Old Granary to photograph another wedding. wedding. Before leaving, she remembered the scene of the pastor dying. He had pointed to his chest and repeatedly said, "Snake." Lauren also remembered the man in her dream had a snake tattoo on his chest. The police arranged Dora's photos in chronological order. At 9:36, the bride arrived, and the pastor was drinking outside his room. But the church manager said that door never opened. They speculated that the pastor must have a key. However, no key was found at the scene or on the body. Lauren immediately suspected that Dora had sneaked into the pastor's room while taking the photos. Perhaps she had secretly taken the key. The police took Dora's fingerprints and DNA. It was said that she should have helped the victim with first aid instead of rushing to take pictures. Dodds sensed the sincerity in her words, and he developed a more favorable impression of her. It wasn't until a colleague appeared, breaking the awkward silence, that he remembered to ask her about the whereabouts of the key, but she replied that there was nothing to worry about. Lauren questioned Lenny's 3 daughters again. Judging from the crime scene photos, the pastor was in a bad mood. He must have been troubled. Lenny's second daughter didn't hide anything either. In fact, she and the pastor had been in love for over a year. Recently, they had been planning to confess to Lenny, but she insisted that even if her father lost control, he would absolutely not kill anyone. Meanwhile, another couple was getting married at Old Granary. The bride, Florence, held hands with her lover Sandra, her face beaming with happiness as she listened to her brother Clive's blessings. Everyone raised their glasses with the couple. Just a minute later, Florence collapsed, unconscious. This was the second wedding murder that same day. Based on the evidence at the scene, it was speculated that someone had poisoned Florence's dishes. Besides Florence, only 3 people were at the table: Clive, Sandra, and her mother. All 3 could potentially benefit from Florence's death. Another commonality between the 2 wedding incidents was the presence of a female reporter who had previously stated she would be photographing the wedding at Old Granary. Lenny's memory gradually returned. He recalled initially intending to go to the pastor's room to find him. Suddenly, someone punched him. He vaguely saw someone use a key to open a small door and leave the pastor's room. Lenny tried to chase after them, but the killer locked the door. He pulled out the dagger from the pastor's body. He wanted to run to the main hall for help, but then he collapsed. His only impression was that the killer had a snake tattoo on his chest. Although this sounded illogical, the tattoo kept repeating itself, as if reminding Lauren that everything was connected to her dream. While they were talking, Dodds discovered a key on the lawn. It was the key to the pastor's room. Could the killer have thrown it away while fleeing? Clive also exhibited similar symptoms. Blood was flowing from his mouth and nose. Fortunately, he received timely medical attention and was unharmed. 21 years ago, Clive was driving his fiancée when they were involved in an accident. She died. Since then, he had become an alcoholic. In recent years, he had repented and abstained from alcohol. Therefore, he did not drink at the wedding and certainly did not touch Florence's glass. She was a vegetarian, so the only dish she and Clive shared was a walnut butter dessert. This proved that the killer had poisoned the dessert. Outside, a key was waiting to be discovered, and it had a strange letter X engraved on it. The suspect in the other case could not yet be clearly identified. At least Clive had been ruled out because he had also been poisoned. Independent forensic analysis by the police, comparing Florence and Clive's blood samples, revealed traces of tetrahydrozoline. If present in sufficient quantities, it becomes a deadly nerve agent, though it doesn't act immediately. Therefore, the perpetrator may not necessarily be someone seated at the head table. Tetrahydrozoline is often an ingredient in over-the-counter eye drops. Coincidentally, Dora always carried eye drops with her. She attended both weddings. She even took the photo of the pastor. The small door to the pastor's office was open at the time. At the Old Granary wedding, she arrived 15 minutes late. By the time she arrived, the guests had already finished eating. The reason for her lateness was that she had to go to the police station to provide a DNA sample. This was her alibi. But Lauren still believed Dora was involved in the murder at the first wedding. The reason was that her record showed a history of domestic violence. Her husband was impotent. The truth is, she saw a passerby kicking and cursing a stray dog, and she became so emotional that she exploded and beat the person up. She also threw the expensive camera at him. Meanwhile, the third wedding was in full swing. The groom, Sahir, enthusiastically welcomed his close friend, Hamas, who had traveled from afar. But just as he approached, a gunshot suddenly rang out. This was the third wedding murder of the day. Hamas was supposed to be the best man, but he had recently argued with Sahir and was removed from the position. Based on the bullet trajectory and the wound, the police speculated the killer was no more than 20 meters away from Hamas. Lauren and Dodds discovered a jeweled-handled gun on the grass nearby. First, it was the key, then the murder weapon. Why did the killer always leave evidence at the scene? Was the killer in a hurry after committing the crime, or intentionally leaving it behind? Looking at the situation now, everyone felt there was a serial killer targeting couples. Before and after the incident, Dora was at the police station being questioned, so she should have been cleared of suspicion. She she generously provided the police with a series of photos of the second wedding scene. In the dark room where the photos were developed, she and Dodds looked at each other. Suddenly, he noticed a picture she had taken with a different camera. At the first wedding scene, Lenny's second daughter had also recorded something on her phone. The bullet removed from Hamas's body had 3 X marks. Lenny's second daughter also sent back a photo she had taken. Right at that scene, there was someone very familiar to Lauren, the man with the tattoo in her dream. On the way back, the police chief heard a song playing on the radio. An anonymous person, using the name of a pastor, had requested this song. The message was to send the town 1, 2, 3 kisses, along with a giant kiss on its way. Who would use the name of the first victim to request the song, if not the killer? And did the 1, 2, 3 kisses in the message correspond to the X marks? For example, in the first case, an X mark was found on the key. In the third case, the bullet had 3 X marks. Following this lead, the police indeed found a cup engraved with 2 X marks in the tableware from the second case. The request for a song was sent from an anonymous mailbox to the radio station just minutes after the third murder occurred. The content was to send to the town 1, 2, 3 X marks plus a 10. The numbers are codes corresponding to 10, 20, 30, and 40 respectively. If put into a wedding anniversary system, 10 years would be tin or aluminum. The murder weapon would be a straight-bladed dagger. 20 years would be porcelain. The murder weapon would be a poisoned porcelain cup. 30 years would be pearl, corresponding to a pearl-handled gun. 40 years would be ruby. The song on the radio was named Ruby. The police immediately announced that the remaining couples should postpone their weddings. The murders may have been staged, but the victims were chosen randomly. It seems the killer is concocting a complex and sophisticated scheme. But what was his motive? The case had fallen into a giant labyrinth, leaving the police almost at a dead end. Now, the only hope they could pin on was Lauren's dream. Who exactly was that man? With that question in mind, Dodds decided to take Lauren back through her bizarre dream. Her father led her into the grand hall. There were 3 rows of seats on each side. The guests were all strangers. The officiant was making strange gestures. It was then that she realized the scene wasn't a wedding at all. 3 rows of seats on each side, with an aisle in the middle. The officiant's actions weren't those of a ceremony, but rather like a male flight attendant guiding passengers to the emergency exits. Lauren also remembered seeing the man walk past her on the plane. They were on the same flight. Years of experience solving cases helped her try to imprint the image of that suspicious man in her dream. In fact, her boyfriend had proposed to her when she went to London. She still hadn't decided whether to agree or refuse, but with the murders happening one after another, she had no time for personal thoughts. The victims and their families all needed her. The police arrested the man. When the evidence was presented, he didn't panic, but calmly explained that he was a member of a mafia organization. He had accompanied a client who owed a lot of money to the gang to collect the debt, not to kill anyone. If that were the case, then the person he was with was likely on the same flight as Lauren. Sure enough, Dodds found a familiar name on the passenger list. The police summoned all the relatives of the 3 victims, who were also suspects, to one place. In the first wedding murder, the killer acted early in the morning. The killer randomly selected a victim, then sneaked in through a small unlocked door, killed the pastor, and took the key. In the second wedding murder, the killer got into the car, prepared food, and poisoned a cup. Then, in the third murder, the killer used a pearl-handled gun to shoot the victim. Each crime scene was marked with an X. Anyone would assume it was the work of a serial killer. But tracing back to the second case, it's not hard to understand why the evil killer carved 2 X's on the cup. Besides misleading the police, he also marked it to know exactly which cup had been poisoned, and to ensure it was placed right in front of the victim. The first and third cases were random murders. Only the second was precise and premeditated. Seeing the passenger list, the police realized the killer was Florence's brother, Clive. He knew the man was watching, so he had drawn a similar snake tattoo on his chest to ensure even the slow-reacting Lenny would see it. Clive had both harmed the man and killed Florence, the woman he hated to the core. 21 years earlier, the driver who took his fiancée out wasn't him, but Florence. Florence was a drunk driver. She was Clive's only sister, so he had no choice but to take the blame for her. But the days that followed only got worse. Florence had money and a lover, while Clive was burdened with debt and a life of uncertainty. He wondered if he would have been happier than Florence if it weren't for that incident. Gradually, he developed a murderous intent. The constant pressure from the mafia made this series of murders the only solution he could think of, but he ended up taking the lives of 2 innocent people. Just as the case was solved, Dodds and Lauren were hit with another murder. A man died mysteriously on a bus. His lips were pale and swollen, and there were clear red marks on his neck, indicating he had been strangled. This type of murder could be done in minutes, but it was rush hour, with many people around. So how did the killer manage to commit the crime right in front of everyone? The police found a white card on the victim. The victim victim, Ian, 33 years old, lived in an apartment in Block 14 near the bus route starting point. According to the driver, Ian was always the first person to board the bus every morning. He would swipe his card for Route 80 and then take a free newspaper. He sat in the upper deck, front left row. He only got off at the Barspa stop. Recently, there had been road construction everywhere, so the bus service was a little late. The driver was in a hurry and didn't notice if there was anyone suspicious. Ian was unemployed and had no income. So where did he take the bus every day? Police searched his locked apartment and unexpectedly found a package. Inside was a bag of cash containing only $20,000, along with a ticket to Clarence's talk show the previous day. Clarence was an emeritus professor of American history and an authoritative expert on blues music. Tickets to his talks were quite difficult to obtain. Clarence hadn't noticed if Ian had been in the audience the previous day. Between 8 and 9 this morning, before and after the incident, Clarence was with his mistress, so he had a solid alibi. After the two police officers left, Clarence called an acquaintance, hoping to use their connections to avoid police harassment. But if he was innocent, why the urgency? An auction was underway. A bidder had paid £3,600 for item 7, but the brothers who owned the auction house seemed dissatisfied. The price was 10% lower than they expected. They urgently needed the money to pay off debts. At this point, they could only rely on the other item. Police investigations revealed that Ian had single-handedly thwarted an armed robbery 5 years prior. The criminal gang members were still in prison. However, the possibility of them hiring someone to kill him couldn't be ruled out. Whoever killed Ian, the killer must have known him very well. He was an extremely disciplined man. 7 days a week, he would get on his bus at the same stop every morning. He took a free newspaper and solved a crossword puzzle in his usual seat. On the day of the crime, he had only solved half of it. Based on the tight time frame, the death was estimated to be around 8:15 a.m. The bus had just reached Morrison Street, and normally it would arrive at its final stop at 8:27 a.m. Therefore, the killer took advantage of this 12-minute gap. It's highly likely the killer was sitting right behind Ian, quickly strangling him before leaving the scene. The police found a witness also sitting on the upper deck. Hillary always paid attention to Ian on the bus. This time, she was sitting at the top of the stairs on the right, so she could clearly see all the passengers getting on and off. Furthermore, she could testify that there was a suspicious man sitting behind Ian. During this time, the man stood next to Ian for about half a minute. Neighborhood security cameras recorded Ian boarding the bus on Morrison Street at approximately 8:15 a.m. The technical department confirmed that the white card belonged to a luggage locker at the bus station. Dodds and Lauren split up. Lauren retrieved a backpack from the lockers. Inside were leather goods and silver body paint. Dodds went to listen to Clarence's talk. At the scene, he encountered a young man who dared to address Clarence informally as Nick. Nick questioned Clarence's authority on blues music and issued a challenge. He claimed that blues music could be recreated by a program he had developed. Therefore, 3 days later, he would present 3 tracks. If Clarence could distinguish which one was a genuine blues recording, he would publicly apologize and acknowledge Clarence's expertise. Based on Hillary's testimony, the police sketched a suspect's profile. Lauren used this as a target to search everyone who boarded and alighted bus route 80 during those 12 minutes. Dodds gave Clarence the surveillance footage that captured him. In an instant, his expression changed. After boarding the bus, he sat on the upper deck, but refused to specify whether he was sitting behind Ian. What exactly was he trying to hide? The police investigation revealed that last week, Ian got off the bus, took his backpack from the locker, and went into the restroom. 20 minutes later, he emerged with a completely new appearance. It turned out that at a fixed time, Ian would disguise himself as Mr. Darcy and stand in the central square. It was a combination of art and body performance. Lauren and Dodds met Hillary in the square. She occasionally painted there to earn extra money, but never imagined that the person she saw on the bus every day was actually Mr. Darcy standing across from her. However, this gave them a new clue. Once, Ian was standing in front of a street bulletin board, seemingly looking at something. Dodds, standing in front of the bulletin board, suddenly noticed something. Beneath the glass factory lay a body. There was blood on the victim's nose, and broken glass shards surrounded it. Dodds recognized it immediately as his best friend from school, Aylin. Aylin had no family left. His only sister had also passed away a few years earlier. Since then, he had lived alone, unemployed and neglecting himself, spending his days mingling with vagrants. Forensic experts determined that Aylin had been dead for at least 4 days. His pockets had been ransacked. His nose was severely damaged. Bloodstains indicated a violent attack on his face. The fatal wounds were trauma and blows. There were no defensive wounds on his body. The police suspected it wasn't a premeditated murder. A bottle label was found on the ground, initially suggesting it was a 9-bottle bottle. Dodds wasn't surprised by Aylin's death. After all, he often provoked others. But how could he explain in the ransacked pockets. He had no valuables. Surely the killer wasn't looking for money. The killer was searching for something else. He even deliberately knocked over the shelf to break the glass, a diversion tactic. Considering Ian had been standing in front of the bulletin board looking around, could it be that he witnessed Aylin's incident, leading to his murder? The police chief reminded them both that if Ian was a witness in the case, why didn't he report it to the police? Could it be related to the $20,000 in the backpack? In the past 7 years, Aylin had traveled to America 3 times, each time for a month. He even rented a car for 4 weeks from the airport and stayed in luxury hotels. But with his financial situation, how could he afford such enormous expenses? Lauren and Dodds found a 666 street sign in Aylin's house. There were also many blues music CDs scattered in his bedroom. His trips to America were all for collecting mementos. This was somewhat beyond Dodds' imagination of Aylin. Dodds picked up the list of music Aylin had written himself. Listening to his old friend's favorite song, he couldn't help but feel sorrow. In a book titled Contract at the Crossroads, Lauren discovered Clarence's signature. These cases seemed to be connected to him again. In the section Aylin had marked, there was a mention of a man named Little Robert. Legend has it that Little Robert at the Mississippi Triangle intersection encountered a real devil and sold his soul for the gift of playing blues music. This story is the legend behind the birth of blues music. The forensic team pieced together the broken bottle at the scene. The barcode traced it to a bottle sold the previous Wednesday at a nearby liquor store. The buyer was Clarence. This time, he couldn't refuse the police summons. Even after seeing the photo of Aylin, he refused to provide any clues. His face showed a hint of tension, but he feigned calm. He said the bottle must have been carelessly left behind in a taxi and picked up by a passenger. He couldn't understand how it ended up shattered at the scene. Regarding the time Aylin was murdered, Clarence was with the 2 brothers who owned the auction house. He was a potential customer and had a solid alibi. When shown photos of Aylin and Ian, both denied ever having met anyone. When the police requested fingerprints, they adamantly refused. Dodds confessed to his friends about Aylin's death. No one was surprised. As Dodds had said, Aylin's mouth would inevitably reveal its truth sooner or later. Only one friend provided a clue. Just before Aylin's death, this man had been seen drinking at a bar, a stark contrast to his usual distressed demeanor. That day, he seemed incredibly happy. For the first time, his eyes sparkled with joy. It was said that he had found a path to revenge connected to the intersection Little Robert had visited. While it was said that at the intersection, Aylin had marked the location of a map guiding the way to find Little Robert's demon. If he had really found that map, what then? Could that be his path to revenge? 24 hours later, Aylin died mysteriously. Someone had rummaged through his pockets. So, was he killed because of the map? And where is the map now? Who took it? Dodds and Lauren questioned Clarence once again. This time, he admitted that he was initially confused when he saw the picture of Aylin. In fact, the 2 had met before. Aylin had initiated a conversation with him during a lecture on blues music, but he didn't understand anything Aylin said. Just when the case seemed to be at a standstill, the police department delivered good news. The suspect in the sketch had been found. He was Gordon, a well-known figure in town. He was 36 years old, a former soldier, and his physique perfectly matched the description of the killer. However, during a patrol in 2012, his left wrist was shot, making it impossible for him to even grip a rope. Therefore, he couldn't have committed murder. At the same time, the police reviewed the bus's GPS data. Dodds discovered that the route had changed, but there were no road repairs in the nearby area. The driver said he changed the route because he saw an obstacle. At the moment Ian was murdered, the bus entered the tunnel, but the automatic lighting system malfunctioned and didn't turn on. The footage was played around 7 a.m. It wasn't until 11:45 that the authorities received a complaint about the removal and processing of the evidence. It turned out to be a prank by some children. The bus takes at least a minute to pass through the tunnel. This means the killer didn't necessarily have to be sitting right behind Ian. He could have easily approached and attacked. And in such a dark environment, Hillary couldn't have seen anyone standing next to Ian. She lied, and the suspect's portrait she provided was certainly fake, but she didn't have malicious intent. 5 years prior, when Ian bravely stopped a criminal gang, she had fallen deeply in love with him. Afterward, every time she happened to see him by the bus, she found it hard to suppress her feelings and wanted to confess. She also knew early on that Mr. Darcy and Ian were the same person. She often used the excuse of painting portraits in the town square to earn extra money, but in reality, she just wanted to be near him more. Providing false clues was also a way to contribute to the case, hoping the police would quickly catch the killer of Ian. She was also a pitiful figure, but unintentionally wasted a lot of the police's time. At this point, the police investigation using surveillance cameras found the person who placed the obstacles on the road. It was another familiar face. On the day of the duel between Nick and Clarence, everyone was present, eager to see the contest between the new generation and the seasoned professionals professor. Who would win? Nick designed a test, the song Prison Blues Roots by Lito Roberts. The original was damaged. 8 measures in the middle were unexpectedly cut out. The record label deemed this version unsuitable for release, but Columbia Records found an intact copy kept by Lito Roberts' family. Nick then spent a large sum of money to obtain the rights to use it. No one had ever heard this song before. Choosing 2 of the 3 songs to complete the piece and finding the true original was incredibly difficult, but Clarence was, after all, a master of blues music. After listening to each version only once, he easily recognized the third version as Lito Roberts' original. The reason was that the microphone Nick's group used had a characteristic acoustic distortion, the most common type of distortion in recordings. Another reason was that Lito Roberts was near a railway when he recorded the song. Nick's first and second chords completely lacked the sound of passing trains. Nick was impressed, but he still harbored resentment. Clarence also recognized Nick as his former doctoral student, whose dissertation he had rejected. Nick's thesis had been deemed rubbish. Nick, consumed by hatred, desperately sought to redeem his honor. Of course, his revenge wasn't limited to that. The auction house held a map with Lito Roberts' signature and date. It accurately recorded the location of the contract at the crossroads, a place that had been there for years. Scholars had turned Lito Roberts' story into a legend, but this map proved everything, the place where it all began. The map depicts the birthplace of blues music, the birthplace of the genre, and the presence of missionaries and the sound of their train whistles. This map represents the exact time and place of the blues' origin. Its value far exceeds money. Clarence had been searching for it for 20 years. Nick's revenge was to seize ownership of the map. The starting price of £300,000 was pushed up to £660,000. Nick became the ultimate winner. But at the same time, the police arrived at the auction house and arrested all the suspects present. The real owner of the map was undoubtedly Alan. He wanted to sell it for a high price, so he went to the local auction house. 2 struggling shop owners tricked him into believing the map was fake. They tried to buy it for £500 but were unsuccessful. Later, they learned that Clarence had been searching for the map, so they acted as intermediaries, introducing Alan to him and offering a commission. That's why the police arranged the transaction at the glass factory. But when they arrived, Alan was already dead. Clarence had also received a text message saying they had the map and asked him to meet them on the upper deck of the bus at 8:15. Lauren said Clarence was lying and intended to arrest him. Nick seized the opportunity to mention Clarence's fingerprints on the bottle of wine. He was certain the killer was Clarence. At this point, the real killer finally revealed a weakness. The police had never revealed the fingerprints on the bottle, so how did Nick know? Moreover, an hour earlier, the police had searched Nick's apartment and discovered that he had been stalking Clarence for the past 2 weeks. He had even disrupted a meeting at the glass factory. Nick had arranged for Alan to arrive 15 minutes early, wanting to get the map before Clarence, but Alan refused to sell it to Nick. Enraged, Nick killed Alan, but Alan didn't have the map with her. Nick's plan failed. He calmed down and vandalized the crime scene. Just then, the 2 bidders arrived as scheduled. Seeing the corpse, they softened and pretended to have accidentally dropped it. The 3 of them, not wanting to be involved, covered up the murder. Ian witnessed everything from the bulletin board. He then blackmailed Nick for $20,000. After Nick gave him the money, he worried about being exposed, so he decided to kill Ian. He orchestrated an assassination attempt on Ian on a bus. He not only sabotaged the automatic lighting in the tunnel, but also erected fake signs on the road. He was the one caught on camera. He hacked the phones of 2 auctioneers and sent them messages arranging a bus ride with Clarence. He himself had been sitting on the upper deck since before 8:15. When the bus entered the dark tunnel, he struck. All the clues pointed to Clarence. This was Nick's revenge. Even then, he wasn't satisfied. He heard that the 2 auction houses had found the map and wanted to sell it to Clarence. He was a wealthy young man, spoiled since childhood. He was used to having everything in the world under his control. Yet before Clarence, he experienced his first major setback. But life isn't a game. The world wasn't created to serve him. From a failure, he transformed into a burning desire for revenge. From beginning to end, he never truly understood what he really needed. He remained the same, obsessed and insane. Hatred led him into the abyss. The film ends here. Thank you for watching and see you in the next story.